The rain fell heavily that evening in Lagos as Ada sat quietly inside a crowded Danfo bus heading toward Ojota. The conductor kept shouting aggressively, "Ojota, CMS, Yaba, enter with your change." But Ada barely heard him. Her mind was far away. NYSC camp had ended just 3 weeks ago, yet her heart still remained there with Felix. She slowly touched the bracelet Felix gave her during their final night at the orientation camp and smiled faintly. "Even if this country frustrates us, I will never leave you," Felix had promised her that night. "We will build our future together." Back then, Ada believed every word with all her heart. But outside camp, reality was completely different. The beautiful memories of parade ground drills, campfire nights, Mami market dates, and morning devotion had suddenly been replaced by rejection emails, endless job hunting, transport struggles, and family pressure. Nigeria was no longer smiling at them. Slowly, life was beginning to test their love. Ada lived with her aunt inside a small one-room apartment in Bariga. Every morning, she woke up before 5 a.m. to fetch water before preparing for interviews. Some days, she traveled from Bariga to Lekki or Victoria Island just to attend interviews that lasted less than 5 minutes. Most companies were not interested in her certificate. Some wanted years of experience she didn't have. Some wanted connection. Others wanted something worse. One hot afternoon, Ada attended another interview at a company in Lekki. The receptionist barely glanced at her CV before asking, "Do you know anybody here?" Ada quietly shook her head. "No, ma." The woman sighed sympathetically. "You can still submit it, Sha, but without connection in this country." Ada forced a smile and walked away. Outside the building, she stood under the scorching sun fighting back tears. 4 years in university, 1 year NYSC, yet no job, no stability, no direction, only frustration. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was Felix. Immediately, her mood softened slightly. "Baby," Felix said excitedly from Abuja, "guess what?" Ada managed a weak smile. "What happened?" Felix laughed excitedly. "I finally got a temporary position for my PPA extension work here. The salary is small, but at least I can survive." Ada nodded quietly. "That's good." Felix noticed her sadness in his voice immediately. "You don't sound happy." Ada sighed deeply. "I'm tired, Felix." "Still interview stress?" "Yes." "How did it go?" Ada looked around helplessly. They didn't even care. Felix became quiet for a few seconds before speaking softly. "Don't worry, things will get better." Ada nodded even though he could not see her. Everybody kept saying the same thing. Things will get better. But nobody ever explained when. Meanwhile, life in Abuja was also dealing with Felix mercilessly. He stayed in a tiny self-contained room in Kubwa with 2 other coppers. The room was hot and uncomfortable. Sometimes there was no electricity for 2 straight days. Water was another problem entirely. But Felix endured everything because he still believed in his dreams. Every morning he dressed neatly and moved around Abuja submitting CVs. Wuse, Maitama, Gaki, anywhere he had vacancy. Yet nothing positive came out of it. One company demanded a 5,000 naira processing fee. Another company promised employment only if he had government connection. One evening, after another failed interview, Felix entered his room angrily and threw his tie on the floor. "This country is wicked," he shouted. His roommate Chinedu laughed bitterly from the corner. "Guy, now you know?" Felix sat down heavily, exhausted. "We studied hard for years. Look at us now." Chinedu nodded sadly. Nigeria can humble somebody. The room became silent. Outside, the loud sound of generators filled the environment. Felix picked up his phone and saw Ada's message, "I miss you." Immediately, he smiled. Despite all the suffering, Ada was still his peace. Weeks passed and the distance between them slowly became difficult. At first, they spoke every night. Then work stress reduced the calls. Network issues caused misunderstandings. Exhaustion caused more arguments. One evening, Ada called Felix repeatedly, but his line was unreachable for hours. She became worried. Around 11 p.m., Felix finally returned the call. "Why didn't you pick my calls?" Ada asked emotionally. Felix sighed tiredly. "I was busy." "Busy since afternoon?" "Ada, I'm stressed." "I'm stressed too." Felix raised his voice unintentionally. "So what do you want me to do?" The harshness in his tone shocked Ada immediately. Silence followed. Then Felix calmed down. "I'm sorry." Ada wiped her face slowly. "I just miss you." Felix closed his eyes painfully. "I miss you too." But something had already changed between them. The sweetness was reducing, pressure was slowly entering the relationship. 2 months later, Ada finally got a job offer, but it was nothing close to what she imagined. The salary was only 45,000 naira monthly. Transport alone would consume almost half. Still, she accepted because she was desperate. The company belonged to a strict woman called Mrs. Bamidele, a woman feared by every staff. On Ada's first day, Mrs. Bamidele looked at her coldly and said, "Young graduates nowadays think life is easy. If you want to survive here, forget your pride." Ada nodded quietly. The work environment was toxic. Staff members were insulted publicly, salaries were delayed constantly, employees worked overtime without extra pay. Yet everyone endured because jobs were scarce in Nigeria. One afternoon, Ada overheard 2 female staff whispering, "That girl resigned today. Why?" Oga was disturbing her emotionally. Ada pretended not to hear, but fear entered her heart immediately. Nigeria was hard for young women, very hard. Eventually, Felix also got a contract position with a logistics company in Abuja. The salary was slightly better than Ada's, but the pressure was unbearable. His boss insulted workers daily. One mistake could lead to salary deduction. Still, Felix forced himself to continue. One afternoon, his boss shouted at him publicly inside the office. "Are you blind?" The entire office became silent instantly. Felix felt humiliated. "I'm sorry, sir." His boss slammed documents angrily on the table. "Sorry doesn't fix incompetence." Everybody lowered their heads in silence. Later that night, Felix sat outside his apartment thinking deeply. This was not the life he imagined for himself. Where were all the promises society gave young graduates? Study hard, graduate, serve your country, get a good job, build your future. Everything sounded like lies now. His phone rang again. Ada was calling. He smiled immediately and answered. But the conversation quickly turned into another argument. "You hardly call me anymore," Ada complained sadly. Felix sighed. "I'm trying to survive." "So am I. You think Abuja is easy? You think Lagos is easy?" Silence followed again. Then Ada spoke softly. "Felix, are we drifting apart?" Felix closed his eyes painfully. No, but deep inside he was no longer sure. December arrived, but neither of them felt festive. Prices of food had increased again, transport fare doubled, even buying data became painful. Nigeria was squeezing everybody financially. One evening after work, Ada entered a supermarket to buy groceries. As she checked the prices, her eyes almost filled with tears. A small basket of food consumed nearly her entire weekly salary. While calculating expenses, she noticed a young couple shopping happily together. They were laughing freely without worries. For a brief moment, Ada imagined herself and Felix like that, happy, stable, together. But reality quickly interrupted her thoughts. Distance was slowly killing their relationship. A few days before Christmas, Felix surprised Ada with a visit to Lagos. The moment Ada saw him at the bus park, she ran into his arms emotionally. For some seconds, all their pain disappeared completely. "I missed you," she whispered. Felix smiled softly. "I missed you more." They spent the entire day together at the beach, laughing and remembering camp memories. But even during the happy moments, tension still existed quietly beneath the surface. Later that evening, while eating at a small restaurant, Ada suddenly asked carefully, Felix, where is this relationship going? Felix looked up slowly. What do you mean? Ada sighed deeply. We've been struggling for months. We hardly see each other anymore. It's temporary. But for how long? Felix became defensive immediately. So what are you saying? Ada looked away sadly. I'm tired of surviving. I want peace. Felix frowned painfully. You think I'm enjoying this? That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Nearby customers slowly turned to look at them. Ada lowered her voice quietly. Sometimes love is not enough. That statement pierced Felix deeply. He dropped his spoon slowly and stared at her. So after all the promises, don't do that. No, say it clearly. Ada looked away helplessly. I don't know anymore. Silence followed. Painful silence. Then Felix laughed bitterly. Nigeria has finally defeated us. Ada's eyes filled with tears immediately. Don't say that. Felix shook his head sadly. But it's true. Days later, Felix returned to Abuja. Communication between them reduced further. Calls became shorter. Messages became colder. Sometimes one person ignored the other for hours. The love was still there, but frustration was poisoning it slowly. Then one evening, something happened that changed everything. Ada stayed late at work because of extra assignments. Most workers had already gone home. Only Ada and her manager remained inside the office. Suddenly, the manager, Mr. Raymond, moved closer to her desk. You work very hard, he said slowly. Thank you, sir. He smiled strangely. You deserve promotion. Ada became uncomfortable immediately. Thank you, sir. He leaned closer. But in this life, people help those who help them. Ada's heart skipped instantly. She understood exactly what he meant. Sir? The man smiled shamelessly. You are a beautiful girl, Ada. Fear gripped her chest immediately. She stood up quickly. I need to go home. But the man blocked her path gently. Young girls nowadays should learn how life works. Ada finally escaped from the office shaking with fear. That night, she cried endlessly inside her room. Nigeria was already frustrating her enough. Now, powerful men wanted to take advantage of her. Later that night, Felix called her. Ada almost told him everything but stopped herself. He was already battling enough problems, so she simply whispered, I had a bad day. Felix replied tiredly from Abuja, Me too. Neither of them realized how close their relationship was to breaking completely. And somewhere in the darkness of Lagos and Abuja, life was already preparing another painful surprise for both of them. Abuja was alive, but Felix felt completely empty inside. For the first time since meeting Ada at NYSC camp, he began questioning everything. Was love truly enough in a country where survival itself had become a daily battle? Back in camp, life felt simple. They laughed freely. They dreamed boldly. They promised each other forever under the campfire lights. But outside camp, reality had destroyed those dreams one by one. Meanwhile in Lagos, Ada lay awake on her bed, unable to sleep. Her aunt had already gone to bed hours earlier, but Ada's eyes remained open in the darkness. The incident with her manager kept replaying inside her head. She felt disgusted, angry, tired. She had graduated with dignity, yet society kept trying to reduce her to something cheap. Tears rolled slowly down her face as she remembered her university days. The sleepless nights reading for exams, the sacrifices her mother made to pay school fees, the hope she carried during NYSC orientation camp. Nobody prepared her for this kind of reality. The next morning, Ada resumed work, pretending everything was normal. But the moment she entered the office, she noticed strange looks from some colleagues. 2 female workers whispered as she passed. Her heart became uneasy immediately. Before noon, Mrs. Bamidele called her into the office. Ada, sit down. Ada obeyed quietly. Mrs. Bamidele removed her glasses slowly and sighed. I heard you insulted Mr. Raymond yesterday. Ada's eyes widened in shock. Ma? No, ma. Mrs. Bamidele frowned. He said you embarrassed him and disrespected him. Ada's chest tightened instantly. "Ma, that's not what happened." Mrs. Bamidele raised her hand immediately. "Listen carefully. This company does not tolerate indiscipline. You young graduates should stop behaving like the world owes you something." Ada could barely believe what she was hearing. "Ma, Enough," the woman snapped harshly. "Since you think you know too much, you can leave." Ada froze completely. "Ma?" Mrs. Bamidele pushed a brown envelope toward her. "Your salary is inside. Consider yourself dismissed." For a few seconds, Ada could not move. Her ears rang loudly. Everything around her suddenly felt blurry. Just like that? No explanation? No justice? Nothing. She slowly carried the envelope and walked out of the office while workers avoided eye contact with her. Some pitied her silently. Others were simply grateful it wasn't them. The moment Ada stepped outside the building, tears began flowing uncontrollably. Cars moved noisily along the Lagos road while people continued their busy lives around her. Nobody cared that her world was collapsing. She sat at a bus stop crying quietly. No job, no savings, no peace. And slowly, even her relationship with Felix was dying. That evening, Felix called her excitedly for the first time in weeks. "Baby, guess what? My boss said there might be permanent employment soon." But Ada could barely respond. "What's wrong?" Felix asked immediately. Ada finally broke down completely. "I lost my job." Silence followed. Felix closed his eyes painfully. "What happened?" Ada explained everything through tears. The harassment, the lies, the dismissal. Felix became angry instantly. "These people are evil." Ada laughed bitterly through tears. "This country is evil." Felix tried comforting her for over an hour, but deep down, he also felt helpless. He wanted to protect her. He wanted to solve her problems, but he could barely solve his own. Days passed and Ada fell into depression slowly. She stopped applying for jobs for some time. Her confidence disappeared completely. She avoided friends and ignored most phone calls. Sometimes she spent hours staring at the ceiling, wondering if life would ever improve. Her aunt tried encouraging her. "You are not the first graduate suffering in Nigeria." But those words brought no comfort anymore. One afternoon, Ada received a message from Felix. "We need to talk." Immediately, her heart became heavy. That sentence never meant anything good. Later that evening, Felix called her. His voice sounded weak. "Ada?" She already sensed danger. "What happened?" Felix sighed deeply. "My company is downsizing." Ada's chest tightened. "They want to reduce workers." Silence followed. Then Felix spoke slowly. "I may lose my job too." Ada covered her mouth immediately as tears formed again. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Two young graduates, two broken dreams, two people who once believed love could conquer everything. But reality was proving otherwise. Weeks later, Felix eventually lost the job. The company blamed economic restructuring. Just like that, he became unemployed again. The little stability holding his life together disappeared instantly. Soon, rent issues started. Feeding became difficult. Sometimes he skipped meals entirely just to save money. Yet he still pretended to be strong whenever Ada called. One evening, after trekking a long distance under the hot Abuja sun searching for another job opportunity, Felix suddenly stopped beside the roadside and burst into tears. Not because he was weak, but because he was tired. Tired of struggling, tired of pretending, tired of disappointment. A keke rider nearby looked at him with pity. "Oh, young man, hope no problem." Felix quickly wiped his tears and forced a smile. "I'm fine." But he was not fine. None of them were fine anymore. As months passed, the relationship between Felix and Ada slowly became emotionally exhausting. Their conversations now centered around frustration, bills, depression, and survival. The romance that once made them feel alive had been buried under the harsh weight of adulthood in Nigeria. One night, during a phone call, Ada suddenly spoke softly. "Felix." "Yes?" "I think we're hurting each other now." Felix became quiet immediately. Ada continued painfully. "We've tried." Felix looked down silently. "I still love you," Ada whispered with tears in her voice. "But this life, this pressure, it's destroying us." Felix closed his eyes tightly. He wanted to fight for them. He wanted to promise her better days again, but for the first time in his life, he had no strength left for promises. Finally, he spoke quietly. "Maybe love alone is not enough sometimes." Ada began crying softly. Those words shattered both of them completely, because they were true. After the call ended, Felix sat alone in darkness for hours staring at nothing. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Ada cried herself to sleep while holding the bracelet he gave her in camp. And just like that, a beautiful love story born during NYSC slowly came to an end. No cheating, no betrayal, no hatred, just pain, pressure, frustration, and a country that made survival difficult for young people trying to build honest lives. Years later, whenever Ada saw Copper celebrating online during NYSC orientation camp, she smiled sadly because she understood something many of them did not yet know. Camp was the easiest part. The real battle always begins after NYSC.
This is Beyond Stories, where every story carries a lesson, and every lesson touches the heart. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could inspire your next step.